The envelope was already open when Eleanor Hayes walked into the room. No one told her who had opened it. 3 people sat across the long conference table, each pretending not to notice the others watching her. The lawyer stood near the window, papers in his hands. Outside, late afternoon light reflected off the glass buildings across the street, turning the room a pale, colorless gray. Eleanor took the empty chair at the end of the table. Her husband's name appeared on the folder in front of the lawyer. 42 years of marriage reduced to a stack of documents. She folded her hands in her lap. Across the table, the eldest stepson leaned back in his chair with the quiet confidence of someone who had already calculated the outcome. The stepdaughter scrolled through her phone without looking up. The younger one stared at the envelope like it contained something interesting. The lawyer cleared his throat. "We'll begin." The reading moved quickly at first. Properties, accounts, investments, numbers large enough to feel unreal. Each one landed on the same side of the table. The eldest nodded occasionally. The stepdaughter's phone disappeared into her purse. The younger one began making small notes in a leather notebook. Eleanor listened carefully at first, then less carefully, then not at all, because the pattern had already revealed itself. The lawyer paused halfway through the final page. "And lastly," he said carefully, "there is a property located outside Greenridge County." The eldest frowned slightly. "A property?" The lawyer reached into the folder and removed a small object. "A brass key." He set it gently on the table in front of Eleanor. "This residence has been transferred directly into Mrs. Hayes' name." The room went quiet. The younger one let out a short laugh. "That old place." The stepdaughter leaned forward. "Wait, he still owned that?" Eleanor stared at the key. It looked older than the documents surrounding it. Heavy, worn smooth at the edges. The lawyer slid a thin envelope beside it. "Mr. Hayes included a note instructing that the address be given only to you." Eleanor picked it up slowly. Across the table, the eldest was already shaking his head. "That farm isn't worth anything," he said. The lawyer didn't respond. The meeting ended soon after. Chairs moved. Papers were gathered. Voices lowered to practical discussions. But Eleanor stayed seated for a moment longer. The key was still resting in her palm. Cold. Unexpected. Almost as if it belonged to a door she had never known existed. And somewhere beyond the city, past the highways and empty fields, that door was waiting. She just didn't know yet what would happen when it opened. The attorney's name is Gideon Pruitt. Eleanor knows this because his name is printed on a small brass plate beside the door, and because her husband mentioned him once, years ago, in the context of something she hadn't thought to question at the time. She is thinking about it now. Pruitt reads without inflection. That is the first thing she notices. Not discomfort. Not apology. Just the flat, practiced movement of a man delivering information he has delivered many times before, in rooms that looked exactly like this one. The properties go first. The house in Delwood, the one with the wraparound porch that Eleanor repainted herself the summer her husband's back gave out, transferred to the estate's primary beneficiaries. The rental units on Carver Street. The lake property. The investment accounts held jointly since 1987. All of it moves across the table without touching her. She watches the stepdaughter, Lydia, the one who never learned to say Eleanor's name without a slight pause before it, write something in the margin of her copy. Pruitt continues. Eleanor folds her hands tighter. At some point during the second page, the language shifts. She catches it before she can stop herself from catching it. Companionship arrangements. That is the phrase Pruitt uses when he reaches the section outlining her husband's reasoning. The union, while long-standing, is herein categorized as a companionship arrangement, and assets have been distributed accordingly to reflect the biological family structure. Pruitt does not slow down. He does not look at her. Lydia's pen keeps moving. Eleanor sits with the phrase for a moment. Companionship arrangement. 42 years. The miscarriage in 1991 that no one in this room knows about. The 3 relocations. The selling of her own mother's jewelry to cover a business shortfall her husband never mentioned again. The decade she spent managing the Carver Street units while he traveled for work, keeping records in a ledger she still has somewhere in the back of the filing cabinet they are probably already planning to remove. Companionship arrangement. The youngest stepson, the one with the leather notebook, underlines something on his copy. Pruitt reaches the final page. The key arrives. The room reacts in the way rooms react when something expected fails to appear and something unexpected arrives instead. Not loudly. Just a shift in posture. A repositioning of hands. Pruitt sets the key on the table in front of Eleanor without ceremony. The property at Rural Route 9, outside Greenridge County, has been transferred in full to Eleanor Ruth Hayes, effective immediately upon the decedent's passing. The eldest, she has always called him that in her head, the eldest, because his actual name, Garrett, never felt like something she was permitted to use comfortably, looks at Pruitt as if waiting for a correction. "What property?" he says. "The residence at Rural Route 9. I didn't know he still had that." Pruitt doesn't answer. Lydia leans toward Garrett. "That's the one upstate." She stops. "That place hasn't been touched in years." "It clearly has been," Pruitt says. No elaboration. Eleanor picks up the key. It is heavier than it looks. The metal warm now from sitting in someone's hand before hers, though she doesn't know whose. Pruitt slides a sealed envelope beside it. "Mr. Hayes requested that the address and any accompanying correspondence be delivered only to you, Mrs. Hayes. Privately." Garrett's jaw tightens almost imperceptibly. "We're entitled to full disclosure of all assets." "The asset has already been disclosed," Pruitt says. "The correspondence is personal." Something passes between Garrett and Lydia that Eleanor doesn't try to read. The meeting ends. It ends the way these things end, with the bureaucratic tidying of papers, the scraping of chairs, the murmured coordination of people who already know what comes next. Eleanor does not move immediately. She sits at the end of the table with the key in one hand and the sealed envelope in the other, and she thinks about the phrase companionship arrangement and about the fact that her husband apparently had a property she never knew existed, and about the fact that those two things are now sitting in the same afternoon. Pruitt collects his folders. He pauses near her chair on his way to the door. "Mrs. Hayes." She looks up. He doesn't say anything else. Just a small nod. Brief. Careful. Then he leaves. Garrett is already on his phone in the hallway. Lydia has her coat on. Eleanor sets the envelope on the table in front of her and looks at her name written on the front in her husband's handwriting. Eleanor. Not Eleanor Ruth. Not Mrs. Hayes. Just her name. The way he said it in the early years, before the long silences settled in. She doesn't open it. Not yet. She puts it in her bag alongside the key, stands, and walks out of the room without looking at any of them. The elevator doors close before Garrett finishes his call. She watches the floor numbers descend. Outside, the city continues at its ordinary pace. She stands on the sidewalk for a moment, her bag over one shoulder, the key pressing faintly through the fabric against her side. A door she never knew existed. She still doesn't know which way it opens. The first apartment was on Hessler Street. 3rd floor. One window that faced a brick wall. A radiator that knocked every night at 2 in the morning with the reliability of something alive. Eleanor moved in with 4 boxes and a floor lamp her mother had tried to give away twice. She met Daniel Hayes at a civic fundraiser she had not wanted to attend. He was 51. She was 44. He had been widowed for 6 years and carried it the way certain men carry grief, not visibly, but structurally, the way it reorganizes the interior of a person without altering the surface. He was polite, attentive in a way that felt considered rather than performed. She was cautious. She had reasons to be cautious. They dated for 14 months before he mentioned the children. Not that he had them, she knew that. But he mentioned them in the specific way he mentioned them, which was late and briefly, and with a particular stillness that she recognized even then as a kind of warning she chose not to fully receive. Garrett was 26 at the time. Lydia 23. The youngest, Brent, 19, and still enrolled somewhere he rarely attended. Daniel described them as independent. Eleanor would later understand that independent meant something precise in his vocabulary. It meant They do not require anything from me that I am not already prepared to give, and they will not require anything from you at all. The wedding was small. A restaurant in the west end of the city. 14 people. No photographer at Daniel's preference. His preference about certain things was expressed so quietly that declining felt disproportionate. Garrett did not come. He sent a note. Eleanor never saw it. Lydia came but left before the meal ended, citing a prior commitment she mentioned only once and did not explain. Brent sat at the far end of the table and ate steadily and said very little. Eleanor's own sister pulled her aside near the end of the evening. "You don't have to explain it to me," her sister said. "I wasn't going to," Eleanor said. Her sister looked at her for a moment, then nodded and let it go. The dynamic clarified itself slowly. That was the accurate word for it. Not deteriorated. Not revealed. Clarified, the way a solution clarifies when the sediment finally settles, not a change, just a visibility. Daniel loved her in the way she believed he was capable of loving anyone after the first loss. Fully within his limits. The limits were real and he did not pretend otherwise. She respected that for a long time. What she had not anticipated was the architecture of the household's loyalty. The Carver Street properties had belonged to Daniel's first wife. Eleanor learned this in the third year of the marriage, during a conversation about renovation costs, when Daniel mentioned it the way people mention things they assume have already been discussed. She had not asked. She had not asked because she had believed there was time to ask. There is a particular kind of silence that a marriage can develop around a subject, not hostile, not deliberate, just practiced, the way a path forms not from planning but from repetition. And by the time Eleanor understood the shape of the silence around Daniel's first life, it had been in place long enough that disturbing it felt like the more disruptive act. So she didn't. The stepchildren's resentment was never direct. Garrett was efficient with her. Courteous in the specific way that communicates the absence of warmth without providing grounds for complaint. He called her Eleanor, always, and never Mrs. Hayes, which was the name she had been using for 20 years by the time she stopped noticing the distinction. Lydia ignored her with more energy, which Eleanor had always privately found more honest. Brent simply treated her as a feature of the house. Present. Unremarkable. Adjusted around without acknowledgement. She built a life inside those conditions. Not a diminished life. Not a compensated one. A real life, with its own interior, the garden she planted along the back fence, the reading group she attended on Thursday evenings, the slow accumulation of a friendship with the woman 2 doors down who has since moved away. But real did not mean equal. And equal had never been the arrangement. Daniel's health declined over the last 4 years. He managed it privately for the first 2, which she also discovered belatedly, and which he explained, when she asked directly, as an attempt to avoid burdening her. She had not told him what that explanation cost her to receive. There had not seemed to be a useful moment to tell him. In the final year, he grew quieter in a way that was different from his usual quiet. Less internal. More like someone sorting through a large amount of material in a limited amount of time. He asked her once, during an evening when neither of them was pretending to watch the television, whether she felt the years had been fair to her. She said yes. She said it quickly. He looked at her for a moment with an expression she could not fully read, then turned back toward the window. He did not ask again. She has thought about that moment many times since the reading. She is thinking about it now, standing in the kitchen of the house that no longer belongs to her, the key from Pruitt's table sitting on the counter beside her coffee cup. She does not yet know what the question meant when he asked it. She is not sure she knew what her answer meant either. The first sign is the measuring tape. Eleanor finds it on the kitchen counter on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after the reading. It is not hers. It is a professional grade one, the kind that retracts with a heavy snap, and it has been left beside the fruit bowl with the casualness of something belonging there. She picks it up, sets it back down, makes her coffee. Garrett arrives at 10 without calling ahead. He has a habit of this now, arriving with the unhurried manner of someone inspecting a property, which is, she understands, exactly what he is doing. "I wanted to take some measurements," he says, already moving past her toward the hallway. "For what?" Eleanor says. We're getting estimates. She waits. He doesn't add anything. She hears him in the front room, the tape extending and snapping back at intervals. Then footsteps upstairs. Then the particular silence of a person opening closet doors. She drinks her coffee standing at the counter. When he comes back through the kitchen, he has written figures in a small notebook. He pauses near the back door and looks at the garden through the glass. That's going to need work, he says. Eleanor doesn't respond. He leaves without discussing timelines. Lydia comes 2 days later with a woman Eleanor doesn't recognize. The woman carries a clipboard and walks through the rooms with the brisk efficiency of someone being paid by the hour. She photographs the crown molding. She opens the window in the upstairs bedroom and examines the frame. She crouches near the baseboard in the hallway and makes a note. Lydia follows her, agreeing occasionally with small sounds. Eleanor sits in the reading chair in the corner of the front room and watches them work around her. At one point, the woman with the clipboard pauses near Eleanor's bookshelf. She looks at the books, then at her clipboard. Then she moves on. Lydia glances at Eleanor once during the whole visit. This shouldn't take long, she says. Eleanor nods. It is unclear what this refers to. The calls begin in the second week. Contractors. An electrician. Someone from a staging company who speaks to Garrett on the front porch while Eleanor is weeding the garden beds along the fence. She can hear fragments. Original fixtures. Market timing. Cosmetic updates only. She pulls a weed that has grown into the base of the climbing rose she planted in the second year of the marriage. It comes out in 2 pieces. She leaves both on the ground beside the bed. Brent comes on a Saturday. He is the only one who tells her directly. Not gently. Not cruelly. Just factually, in the way he has always communicated, as if effect is a resource he allocates carefully. We're listing in the spring, he says. Garrett thinks April. Eleanor is at the kitchen table. She has been going through the filing cabinet in the back of the study, pulling out folders, deciding what is hers. How long do I have? She says. Brent looks at the window. Garrett said he'd work with your timeline. That's not what I asked. A pause. End of March, he says. Maybe sooner if the estimates come in clean. She puts a folder in the box she has designated as hers. Brent stays in the doorway for a moment. There's storage, he says. If you need somewhere to put things while you figure out. I have somewhere to go, Eleanor says. She doesn't know if that's true yet. He nods and leaves. She begins packing on a Sunday. She starts with the things that were always clearly hers, her mother's lamp, the reading chair, the small watercolor of the harbor she bought herself on a trip she took alone the year Daniel's traveling was at its heaviest. Then she moves to the things that existed in the ambiguous middle ground of a long shared life. The mixing bowls she bought. The throw she knitted over 2 winters. The framed photograph from the botanical garden, taken by a stranger they'd asked on a warm afternoon in what must have been the 7th or 8th year. She wraps the photograph in a dish towel and sets it in the box. Stands there for a moment with her hands resting on its edges. The house makes its ordinary sounds around her. The refrigerator cycling. The branch of the oak brushing the upstairs window. The distant, muffled rhythm of a neighbor's lawn equipment. She has heard these sounds for 20 years. They do not sound different now. She picks up another folder. Keeps going. The last evening before she leaves, she walks through the garden in the low late light. The climbing rose needs tying back. There is a section of the border bed that will bloom well in May if someone deadheads it in April. No one will know to do that. She doesn't leave a note. She goes back inside, checks the boxes stacked in the hallway, and turns off the kitchen light. The measuring tape is still on the counter. She leaves it there. The motel is called the Harwick Inn, and it smells like carpet cleaner and the particular staleness of rooms that are slept in but never inhabited. Eleanor books it for a week. She is not sure why a week. It is a number that felt neither permanent nor desperate when she said it to the woman at the front desk, which may be the only reason she chose it. Her boxes are in a storage unit on the east side of the city. Unit 14. The lock combination is her mother's birth year. She has 1 suitcase in the room with her. She sits on the edge of the bed the first night and looks at the suitcase and thinks about the fact that she is 66 years old and sitting in a motel room with one suitcase, while the house she lived in for 20 years is being measured for someone else's future. She does not cry. She has not cried since the reading. She is not sure what that means, and she does not examine it. The envelope has been in her bag since Pruitt's office. She opens it on the second night, not because she is ready, but because she has run out of reasons to wait. Daniel's handwriting is more effortful than she remembers. The letters larger, the pressure uneven in places. She reads it twice. Then she folds it carefully along its original creases and puts it back. She sits with the window unit running its low mechanical hum and the parking lot lights coming through the gap in the curtains, and she thinks about what he wrote. He wrote that the property had been in his possession for 31 years. He wrote that he had maintained it quietly through a property management arrangement she would find documented in the folder attached to the deed. He wrote that he had not told her about it. He did not explain why he had not told her about it, except to say that the reasons were complicated and that he had not wanted to introduce a complication into the years they had. He wrote that it was hers now, unencumbered, and that he hoped it would be useful to her. Useful. That was the word he used. She had read it both times, and each time the word sat differently in her chest than she expected. Not warmly. Not coldly. Just with weight. The address is in Greenridge County. She looks it up on her phone. 4 hours west. A rural route number. When she switches to the satellite view, the image shows tree cover, a dirt access road, and what appears to be a structure set back from the road in a clearing. She cannot tell from the image whether the structure is standing correctly. The satellite image is dated 3 years prior. She puts her phone face down on the nightstand. The financial reality arrives on the third morning in the way financial realities tend to arrive, not as a single blow, but as a sequence of smaller reckonings that accumulate into something that has to be looked at directly. Her own savings. Modest. The result of decades of managing a household rather than building an independent reserve, because the household had seemed like the thing that required managing, and the reserve had seemed like something that could come later, and later had extended itself further than she had planned for. Her husband's pension, which she is entitled to a portion of as surviving spouse. The portion is less than she had assumed. She does not know why she had assumed the number she had assumed. She had never actually looked at the documents. She had trusted the broad shape of the arrangement without examining its specific dimensions, which she now understands was a form of faith she had extended in the wrong direction. She writes the numbers on the notepad the motel provides. Then she looks at them. Then she turns the notepad over. She calls her sister on the 4th day. Her sister's name is Vera, and she lives in a suburb 2 states east, and she answers on the second ring the way she always does, as if she has been waiting. Are you sleeping? Vera says. Some, Eleanor says. Where are you? A motel. Temporarily. A pause. Eleanor. I'm fine. You're in a motel. It's temporary. Vera is quiet for a moment. Come here, she says. You can stay as long as... I have the property, Eleanor says. The one from the will. Yes. You haven't seen it. No. So you don't know what it is. No. Another pause. Longer. What if it's nothing? Vera says. What if it's just a falling down building in the middle of nowhere, and he left it to you because he didn't know what else to do with it? Eleanor looks at the notepad on the nightstand. Then I'll figure something else out, she says. Vera doesn't push further. They talk for another 20 minutes about things that have nothing to do with any of this, which is its own kind of help. And when Eleanor hangs up, she lies back on the bed and stares at the ceiling with its faint water stain in the far corner shaped like nothing in particular. She thinks about the word useful. She thinks about 4 hours west. She thinks about the satellite image and the tree cover and the dirt road and the structure she could not confirm was standing. She books a rental car for Friday morning. She does not tell Vera. She does not tell anyone. She lies there in the thin light of the Harwick Inn and holds the key in her hand above her chest the way she held things as a girl when she was trying to understand what they were. The metal is cold at first. Then it isn't. The rental car smells like air freshener and someone else's long drive. Eleanor loads one bag into the trunk, sets her coffee on the roof while she adjusts the seat, and pulls out of the lot before 7. The city empties gradually. First the density, the close buildings, the parked cars on both sides, the pedestrians who move with the particular purpose of people who know where they are going. Then the commercial sprawl at the edges. Then the long, unremarkable corridors of highway that connect places to other places without being a place themselves. She drives without music for the first hour. Then she turns on the radio and finds a station playing something instrumental and leaves it low. The landscape flattens and then shifts. Fields. Tree lines. The occasional water tower with a town name she doesn't recognize. Exit signs for places that have exits, but not much else. She stops once at a gas station outside a town called Merritt and buys a bottle of water and a pack of crackers she doesn't eat. The woman behind the counter has the unhurried manner of someone for whom this town is not a stopping point. Eleanor pays and goes back to the car. She enters Greenridge County just before noon. The county road narrows after the junction. The shoulders are grass rather than gravel. The tree cover increases on both sides until the road feels less like a road and more like a corridor someone cut through the woods and never widened. The town of Greenridge itself is small. Main Street. A hardware store. A diner with a hand-lettered sign. A post office that shares its building with what appears to be a real estate office. A gas station with a single pump. She parks in front of the diner because it is the most obvious place to park and because she has been driving for 4 hours and the crackers did not constitute a meal. Inside, 4 tables. A counter with stools. A woman behind the counter who looks at Eleanor with the evaluating attention of someone who knows every face that typically comes through the door. Eleanor sits at the counter. Coffee, the woman says. Please. The menu is laminated and brief. Eleanor orders without much consideration. While she waits, she takes out her phone and looks again at the address. Rural Route 9. She has the coordinates saved. From the map it appears to be approximately 6 miles north of town on the county road, then a turn onto an access road that does not appear to have a name. The woman sets a plate in front of her. Passing through, she says. Looking for a property, Eleanor says. The woman refills the coffee without being asked. Rural Route 9, Eleanor says. Do you know it? Something shifts in the woman's expression. Not quite recognition. More like a small internal adjustment, the kind a person makes when they decide how much of something they intend to share. The old Aldrich place, the woman says. I don't know what it was called before. Before your time, then. She moves down the counter to attend to something else. Eleanor eats. When she pays, the woman counts back her change and says, without looking up, road gets soft after rain. We had rain Wednesday. I have a regular car, Eleanor says. The woman looks at her then. A full look, unhurried. You'll be fine if you stay in the tracks, she says. The access road is exactly where the coordinates place it. A gap in the tree line. 2 dirt tracks with a grass median. A rusted metal gate standing open, hinged back against a post, as if it has been that way for some time. Eleanor pulls the car to the edge of the road and sits for a moment with the engine running. The gate is open. She had prepared herself in the vague way one prepares for ambiguous outcomes, for a locked gate, for a padlock, for some visible signal of abandonment. The gate is open. She pulls through. The access road is perhaps a 1/4 mile long. The trees press close on both sides. Branches have grown over the track in places, filtering the light into patterns on the ground. The car moves slowly. The road is soft in one section, as the woman at the diner said it would be, but she stays in the tracks and the tires hold. Then the trees thin. Then they stop. The clearing opens in front of her, and she brings the car to a stop without planning to. The house sits at the far edge of the clearing. White clapboard. 2 stories. A covered porch across the front. A barn structure set back to the left, smaller than the house, its doors closed. She sits in the car and looks at it for a long moment. It is not falling down. It is not a ruin. It is a house. A standing, structured, windowed house, with what appears from this distance to be a recently repaired section of porch railing and a roof that does not show the particular sag of long neglect. She had not let herself expect this. She gets out of the car slowly. The air is different here. Cooler than the road. damp with recent rain and the particular weight of trees. She walks across the clearing. The grass has been cut. Not recently, but not long ago either. 2 or 3 weeks, she estimates, the way she learned to estimate from decades of managing a garden. She reaches the porch steps. Stops. On the top step, centered with a precision that is not accidental, there is a bundled sheaf of dried lavender, tied with plain twine. She looks at it for a long moment. She looks at the door. She looks back at the clearing, at her car sitting in the grass, at the tree line enclosing the space on 3 sides. There is no other vehicle. No sound of movement. Just the trees and the cleared grass and the house that should not be standing as well as it is standing, and the lavender on the step that someone left there, and the key still in her coat pocket where she has carried it since the attorney's office. She does not touch the lavender. She takes out the key. She climbs the steps. The key turns on the first try. She had expected resistance. A lock unused for years develops a particular stiffness, the internal mechanism gummed with dust and disuse, requiring coaxing. She had prepared for that. The lock opens cleanly. The door swings inward without protest, balanced on hinges that have been recently oiled. She can smell it faintly. A clean, metallic smell underneath the older wood and cool air of the interior. She stands in the doorway. The front room is furnished. Not lavishly. Not staged in the way the woman with the clipboard had moved through the Delwood house assessing surfaces and angles. Just furnished a chair, a low table, a lamp on a side table near the window. A woven rug on the floor, its colors muted with age but intact. She steps inside. The floor does not shift beneath her. The boards are solid, recently cleaned, the kind of clean that comes from actual washing rather than the surface cleanliness of a place that has simply not been disturbed. She moves through the front room slowly. The lamp has a bulb in it. She reaches down and turns the switch. It comes on. She straightens up and looks at it for a moment, the warm circle of light in the afternoon room, and something she cannot immediately name moves through her chest. She leaves the lamp on. The kitchen is at the back of the house. It faces the tree line through a wide window above the sink. The trees are close here, the clearing narrowing behind the house before the woods begin properly. The kitchen is clean and spare. A table with 2 chairs. A cast iron pan on the stovetop. Shelves along one wall holding a modest arrangement of dry goods, flour, salt, canned goods, coffee, the kind of practical inventory that suggests not a cache, but a habit. She opens the coffee. Recently purchased. The seal intact. She sets it down carefully. Opens a cabinet. Dishes. 4 of them stacked. Plain white. A mug beside them, handleless on one side where a chip has taken a piece, but left it otherwise usable. She closes the cabinet. Upstairs there are 2 bedrooms. The larger one faces the front of the house and the clearing. A bed frame, a mattress covered in clean ticking, a folded quilt at the foot. A dresser with an oval mirror, slightly foxed at the edges. She touches the quilt. The fabric is not new, but it is not degraded either. Soft in the way things get soft with age and use and washing. Someone washed this. The smaller bedroom at the back holds only a single iron bedstead, no mattress, and a wooden chair positioned near the window with an oddly deliberate quality, as if placed there for the specific purpose of looking out at the trees. She does not sit in it. She finds the first thing in the dresser drawer. A receipt. Hardware store in Greenridge. Dated 14 months ago. Paint, sandpaper, replacement window glazing, a box of finishing nails. She puts it on top of the dresser. Looks at it. Goes back downstairs. In the kitchen, she opens the door beneath the sink and finds cleaning supplies. A bucket. A set of brushes still in their packaging. In the small space off the kitchen, a mudroom, barely larger than a closet, with hooks for coats and a low bench for boots, she finds a pair of work gloves folded neatly on the bench. A size that would fit a man. And beside them, a woman's pair. Smaller. The leather still supple. She picks them up. They are the right size for her hands. She stands in the mudroom with the gloves in her hand for a long moment, long enough that the light through the narrow window shifts slightly, and then she sets them back on the bench exactly as she found them. The barn is unlocked. Inside, Tools, organized along the walls with a methodical care that reads as habitual rather than occasional. A workbench with its surface worn smooth at the center. A wood splitter in the corner. A stack of split wood against the far wall, enough for several months of heating. Enough for a winter. She stands in the middle of the barn and turns slowly. The tools are not rusted. The wood is dry. She walks back outside and stands at the edge of the clearing in the late afternoon light. The house faces her. The porch. The windows. The recently repaired railing she had noticed from the car. She can see it clearly now, the new wood slightly lighter than the weathered boards beside it, not yet matched by time. She looks at the cleared grass. At the oiled hinges. At the lamplight still visible through the front window. At the woman's gloves on the bench she did not see herself choosing. She has been treated, for the last several weeks, as someone whose presence carries no weight. Whose decades leave no record. Whose name can be reduced to a category and filed accordingly. This house has been prepared for someone. She is the only one with the key. She goes back inside as the light begins to go. She finds sheets in the cedar chest at the foot of the bed, folded with a precision that suggests they were placed there by someone who expected them to be found. She makes the bed. She does not ask herself yet what any of it means. She goes downstairs, fills the kettle from the tap, the water runs clear after a moment, and puts it on the stove. She finds the coffee again. Measures it. Stands at the window above the sink while the water heats, watching the tree line darken in the last of the light. Somewhere in those trees something moves. A branch shifts. Returns to stillness. She watches the space where it moved for a long moment. Then she turns back to the stove. The folder is behind the dresser. She finds it on the second morning. When she moves the dresser to look at a section of baseboard she noticed the previous evening, a faint water stain, old rather than active, the kind that records a past problem rather than a present one. The folder is thin. Manila. Held shut with a rubber band that has lost most of its tension. She sits on the edge of the bed and opens it. Inside, a deed. Her name already on it, the transfer dated 8 months before Daniel's death. The signature notarized by someone whose stamp she does not recognize, in a county she has never visited. A property management agreement between Daniel and a man named Rupert Olson, Greenridge County, renewable annually, covering maintenance, seasonal preparation, and structural upkeep. The agreement is 12 years old. There are 11 renewal signatures below the original. A folded receipt from a roofing company. Another from a well service. Another from an electrician. And beneath all of it, a second letter. Longer than the first. Different in character. She reads it standing up, which is not how she intended to read it, but is how it happens. The handwriting is earlier than the letter from Pruitt's envelope, steadier, the pressure more even, written at a different point in his decline. He writes that he purchased the property 31 years ago, 2 years before he met her. He writes that he purchased it for reasons he describes as private but not romantic, which is a distinction she reads twice. He writes that he had intended to tell her about it in the first years of the marriage, but that the right moment had not presented itself, and then too much time had passed, and the longer he waited the more complicated the telling became. Until the property existed in his life the way certain things exist, known, present, and unaddressed, accumulating a weight that made them harder rather than easier to approach. She recognizes this. She recognizes it with a precision that is almost physical. He writes about the will. He writes that the distribution was not what it appeared to be. He writes that Garrett had been consulting attorneys for 2 years before Daniel's death, exploring mechanisms for contesting any asset transfer that could be characterized as influenced or coerced. He writes that Lydia had been involved in those consultations. That the language of the will, the companionship arrangement, the clinical redistribution, had been constructed in collaboration with his own attorney as a preemptive measure, designed to remove any ground for challenge by establishing a legal framework too conventional to contest. He writes, the cruelty of the language was intentional. I need you to understand that. It was designed to look like dismissal so that the actual transfer would not attract the kind of attention that could be litigated. She lowers the letter for a moment. Looks at the window. The tree line is bright this morning, the light coming through at a low angle, catching the upper branches. She looks back at the letter. He writes that he is sorry. Not for the house. For the silence around it. For the 14 months of careful introduction before he mentioned the children, and for the decade of managed quiet that followed, and for the evening she said yes when he asked whether the years had been fair to her, and for the fact that he had accepted the yes without pressing further even though he had known, he writes, that she had answered quickly. I accepted it because it was easier to accept. That is not a defense. It is just what happened. She sits down. She had not planned to sit down, but her legs make the decision before she does. She reads that section again. The letter continues. He writes about Rupert Olson, who is the son of a man Daniel knew decades ago, who has maintained the property out of a combination of paid arrangement and what Daniel describes, with characteristic restraint, as personal loyalty to an old debt. He writes that Olson knows she is coming, that the gate would be open, that the house would be ready. He writes that the property generates a small income from a timber lease on the back acreage, enough to cover its own maintenance, with something remaining. He writes that the documentation for this is in the county recorder's office in Greenridge, and that a woman named Petra Hund at that office has been notified to expect her. He writes, near the end, that he does not know whether any of this is sufficient. I don't know if a house repairs what the years accumulated. I suspect it doesn't. But it is what I was able to do from where I was standing, and I did it as carefully as I knew how. The last line is brief. The gloves on the bench are the right size. I checked. She folds the letter, puts it back in the folder, puts the folder on the dresser beside the hardware receipt. She sits on the edge of the bed for a long time. The house makes its sounds around her. The settling of old wood in morning temperature. A bird somewhere close to the window. The faint, distant movement of wind in the upper branches of the tree line. She thinks about a man who measured the size of her hands without telling her why. She thinks about 12 years of maintenance receipts. She thinks about the evening she said yes. She does not know what to do with any of this yet. The letter has reframed the cruelty of the will as strategy, which should be a relief and is, partially. But strategy deployed without disclosure is its own category of decision, and the fact that the outcome was protective does not fully account for the years of silence that surrounded it. And the years of silence do not become transparent simply because a letter has now explained them. She knows this. She also knows that he is dead, and that the letter is what exists, and that she is sitting in a house that someone measured and prepared and stocked and left the lamp working in, with a pair of gloves on a bench that fit her hands. She does not resolve this. She picks up the folder, goes downstairs to make coffee. They arrive on a Thursday morning without calling. She hears the vehicle before she sees it, an engine that moves up the access road with the impatient speed of someone who has decided the road's condition is beneath their concern. Eleanor is on the porch with coffee when the car emerges from the tree line into the clearing. It stops hard on the damp grass, the doors opening before the engine is fully off. Garrett gets out first. He looks at the house the way he looked at the Delwood property after the contractor visits, with the assessing, possessive attention of someone calculating what something is worth rather than what it is. Lydia follows, already holding her phone up, moving it slowly across the facade. Eleanor does not go inside. She stays where she is. Garrett reaches the base of the porch steps and looks up at her. We tracked the registration on the rental, he says. We thought you'd be in a motel somewhere. I'm not, Eleanor says. He looks past her at the front door. We need to come in. No. The word lands without elaboration. Garrett's expression shifts into the register he uses when he is being reasonable, the voice she has heard at holiday dinners and in Pruitt's office, designed to sound like the opening of a conversation when it is the statement of a position. Eleanor, we've had a title search done. The shell structure holding this property has anomalies. The transfer timing, the notarization, there are grounds for a challenge, and our attorney has already filed the preliminary. I know, Eleanor says. Pruitt forwarded it. Then you know you don't have the resources to fight it. She sets her coffee cup down on the porch railing. Petra Hund at the county recorder's office has a capacity attestation on file, she says. Your father brought his physician. Voluntarily. 8 months before he died. Garrett goes still. Lydia lowers her phone. He anticipated this, Eleanor says. He prepared for it. A pause. Garrett looks at the barn. Then back at Eleanor. We're still coming in, he says, and moves toward the steps. The sound comes from the tree line to the left. Not loud. Just the particular sound of a man moving through clearing grass without hurrying. Rupert Olson crosses from the direction of the barn with the unhurried directness of someone who has crossed this ground many times. He carries a splitting axe loosely at his side, not raised, not threatening, just present in his hand the way a tool is present in the hand of a man who has been working. He stops at the base of the steps, one position to the left of Garrett, and does not say anything. He does not need to. He simply stands there, a man who has maintained this property for 12 years, who knows every board and hinge and fence post on it, who is not a hired guard, but something less categorizable and therefore more difficult to dismiss. Garrett looks at him. Olson looks back. The silence holds for a moment. Eleanor reaches into her coat pocket and removes the folder she brought from inside that morning, the one from behind the dresser, with the maintenance receipts and the deed and the capacity attestation copy Petra Hund had made for her. She holds it out. 11 years of signed maintenance records, she says. The deed transfer predating the will by 8 months. A physician's attestation filed with the county. And a letter in your father's handwriting explaining precisely why the will was written the way it was. Lydia has stopped filming entirely. There's also this, Eleanor says. She produces the second page she had set aside during the first reading of the folder's contents, the letter from Daniel to Garrett, the unsigned draft, the one she had read at the kitchen table with her coffee going cold. She does not hand it over. She holds it where Garrett can see the first line. He reads it. His jaw tightens in the same, almost imperceptible way it tightened in Pruitt's office. That's a draft, he says. It may be, Eleanor says. Pruitt has the original correspondence archive. I haven't asked him to look yet. The clearing is quiet. A bird moves in the tree line above the barn. Olson shifts his weight slightly, the axe handle turning once in his grip. Garrett looks at the house for a long moment. Then he turns and walks back to the car. Lydia follows without speaking. The car backs out of the clearing and into the access road, and the sound of the engine diminishes through the trees until the clearing is quiet again. Olson stands at the base of the steps. He looks at the access road for a moment, then looks up at Eleanor. They'll be back, he says. Maybe, she says. He nods once and walks back toward the barn. Eleanor picks up her coffee. It is cold now. She drinks it anyway and looks at the tree line where the car disappeared, and at the quiet grass of the clearing, and at the folder still in her hand with its 11 years of receipts, and its unsigned letter and its physician's stamp. Garrett has not withdrawn. That is not the same as finished. But it is what this morning is. Rupert Olson arrives on a Tuesday without calling ahead, which she will later understand is simply how he operates. She hears the truck before she sees it, a diesel sound, unhurried, moving up the access road at a pace that suggests familiarity with the soft sections. She is on the porch with coffee when it emerges from the tree line into the clearing. The truck is old. Green, or was green at some point, now the color of something that has been through many seasons without complaint. The man who gets out is perhaps 70. Broad through the shoulders in the way that comes from decades of physical work rather than deliberate effort. He wears a canvas jacket and moves across the clearing with the unhurried directness of someone who has crossed this particular ground many times. He stops at the base of the porch steps. Looks up at her. Mrs. Hayes, he says. Mr. Olson. He nods once, as if confirming something, and looks at the porch railing, the section he repaired. Held up, he says. It has, she says. He looks at the clearing. At the barn. Back at the house. I wasn't sure when you'd come, he says. I wasn't either. A pause. You found everything all right. It is not quite a question. The gloves fit, she says. Something in his expression shifts. Not a smile exactly. A settling. He said they would, Olson says. They walked the property that morning, the clearing, the barn, the tree line, then along the edge of the timber acreage where the lease boundary is marked by a rusted cable strung between posts at intervals. The leasing company's operation is set back further, beyond a secondary access road she had not found on her own. Olson explains the lease terms without being asked. Annual payments, indexed since the original agreement. The company has been reliable. There was one dispute in the 7th year over boundary encroachment that Daniel had handled through correspondence. Olson produces a folded copy of the resolution letter from his jacket pocket as if he has been carrying it in anticipation of this conversation. She takes it, reads it, folds it back. He was thorough, she says. About this, yes, Olson says. They stand at the cable boundary for a moment. Beyond it, the timber company's operation is quiet. This is not a cutting season. How did you know him? She says. Olson looks at the cable. My father worked for his father, he says. Long time ago. Different kind of work. She waits. He does not add to it. There is a woman at the diner whose name is Cecile Marsh. Eleanor learns this on her 4th visit, when the woman behind the counter, whose name she is still not offered, operating on the same economy of disclosure as Olson, nods toward a corner table and says, without preamble, she's been asking about you. Eleanor looks. A woman in her mid-50s. Reading glasses. A cup of tea rather than coffee. A book open but face down, the way books are set down by people who are actually watching the room. Eleanor takes her coffee to the corner table. Cecile Marsh looks up without surprise. You're the one at the Aldrich place, she says. Hayes, Eleanor says. Now. Of course. A brief pause. I run the Historical Society. Such as it is. She gestures at the chair across from her. Sit down if you like. Eleanor sits. Cecile Marsh has the manner of someone for whom conversation is a genuine rather than social enterprise. She asks questions that are specific rather than polite, listens to the answers without preparing her next question while Eleanor is still speaking, and offers information about herself in proportion to what she receives, no more. She has lived in Greenridge for 20 years, arrived from somewhere else the way some people arrive in small towns, following a decision rather than a circumstance, she says, which Eleanor understands without requiring elaboration. She runs the Historical Society from a building beside the post office that is open 3 days a week by appointment and 2 days by optimism. She says this without irony. Eleanor finds herself talking more than she had intended. Not about the will or the stepchildren or the letter from behind the dresser. Just about the property. The timber lease. The question of the barn's secondary structure at the back, which Olson had pointed out as a possible equipment shed or, with modification, something else. Cecile Marsh listens. Something else like what? She says. Eleanor looks at her coffee. I don't know yet, she says. She calls Vera on a Sunday and tells her she is staying through the winter. Vera receives this with the silence she uses when she is deciding between several responses. The case, Vera says finally. Pruitt says it's moving slowly. There's nothing I can do about it from the city that I can't do from here. That's practical, Vera says. Is that why? Eleanor looks out the kitchen window at the tree line. The light is different here in the morning, she says. Vera is quiet for a moment. Okay, she says. The mornings are the best part. She has not expected this. She had not organized her expectations around mornings specifically. But there is a quality to the light at this latitude in autumn that she has no prior reference for, low and directional, coming through the east-facing kitchen window at an angle that moves across the table over the course of an hour in a way that feels almost architectural. She begins sitting with it deliberately. Coffee. The window. The light moving. No phone for the first hour. She has not observed this rule consistently. Some mornings the phone is on the table from the start, carrying its freight of forwarded documents and Vera's check-ins and the occasional terse update from Pruitt's office. But on the mornings she manages it, something settles. She does not examine this too closely. There is a reading group in Greenridge that meets on Wednesday evenings at the library, which is also the community room of a building that serves several functions simultaneously in the way that small towns require buildings to. Cecile Marsh mentions it in passing. Eleanor attends once, tentatively, the way she does things now whose outcomes she cannot predict. The group is 7 people. The book is one she has not read. She sits in a folding chair and listens more than she speaks, and nobody asks her to account for herself, which is something she has not realized she needed until it happens. On the walk back to her car afterward, a woman named Dora falls into step beside her. Dora is perhaps 80. Moves without apparent compromise. Wears the specific kind of practical wool coat that suggests she has worn practical wool coats her entire life and found them sufficient. You're at the Aldrich place, Dora says. The Hayes place, Eleanor says. Dora considers this. It'll take a while, she says. Eleanor is not sure if she means the renaming of the property or something larger. She doesn't ask. She finds her mother's lamp in the storage unit during a trip back to the city to sign documents at Pruitt's office. She brings it back in the trunk of the rental car, wedged between two boxes she has decided to keep. She sets it in the front room, on the side table where the other lamp already stands. 2 lamps in the same corner is one too many. She moves the original lamp to the bedroom, stands in the front room and looks at her mother's lamp. Turns it on. The light it throws is warmer than the other one, slightly amber, the shade older and thinner. She has carried this lamp through 4 residences. It looks, she thinks, like it belongs here. She does not say this out loud, but she thinks it, standing in the front room of a house she did not know existed 2 months ago, in a clearing at the edge of a county she had never visited. With the tree line dark beyond the window and the lamp casting its particular warmth across a floor that holds no prior version of her life. The thought arrives without announcement. Without comfort exactly, but without the weight of the weeks before it either. She turns off the overhead light, leaves the lamp on, goes to the kitchen to start dinner. The second folder arrives in the mail on a Wednesday in late November. She almost misses it. The Greenridge post office assigns rural route boxes by number rather than name, and her box, assigned the week she filed her change of address, still feels unfamiliar. The small brass door opening onto correspondence that is only gradually learning to find her here. The envelope is from Pruitt's office. Inside, a brief cover letter, 2 pages of documentation, and a handwritten note on a separate sheet that Pruitt has labeled, in his careful way, personal enclosure, forwarded per decedent's instruction. She reads the cover letter standing at the post office counter. Pruitt writes that the challenge filed by the estate's primary beneficiaries has been formally withdrawn. No terms. No negotiation. Withdrawn. He writes that he does not have visibility into the reasons for the withdrawal, only the filing. He writes that her title is now uncontested. She folds the cover letter, puts it in her bag, drives back to the house. She reads the handwritten note at the kitchen table. It is not from Daniel. The handwriting is unfamiliar, careful, slightly formal, the hand of someone who learned penmanship at a time when it was still taught as a discipline. It is from Rupert Olson. He writes that he has something to show her when she is ready. He writes that it is not urgent and she should not treat it as urgent. He writes that it has been on the property for some time and will keep. He writes, at the bottom, a single additional line. Your husband asked me to wait until the title was clear. Olson arrives the following Saturday. She meets him at the barn. He moves to the back of the structure, past the organized tools and the wood splitter, to a section of the rear wall she has not examined closely. The wall appears solid, planked in the same weathered board as the rest of the barn interior. Olson counts 4 boards from the left corner. He presses a specific point on the 4th board. A section of wall swings inward. Not dramatically. Just a door, constructed to look like the wall, hinged inward on a frame set into the structure. She cannot tell whether it was built this way originally or modified in later. Beyond it, a small room. Perhaps 10 feet by 12. Dry. The air close but not damp. A workbench along one wall. Above it, mounted on a board, a set of keys on labeled hooks. A filing cabinet, 2 drawers. A shelf holding several document boxes, each labeled in Daniel's handwriting. And in the center of the room, on the workbench, a metal document case. She opens it. Inside the case, a letter from Daniel, the longest she has found, running to 6 pages in his later, more effortful hand. Behind it, organized in labeled sections. A survey of the full property, including the rear acreage not covered by the timber lease. The survey notes a section of the land, 11 acres along the northern boundary, excluded from the lease agreement deliberately, which the letter explains. A hydrological assessment. Financial records. An account she did not know existed, held at a regional bank in Greenridge, in her name, funded in deposits over the last 9 years. The balance is not large. It is not trivial either. And at the back of the case, a folded set of architectural drawings. Preliminary. Hand-annotated. The draftsmanship competent, but not professional, the notes in Daniel's handwriting alongside what appears to be a second hand she does not recognize. She unfolds them on the workbench. The drawings show the barn. Modified. A section of the rear converted into habitable space, insulated, with installed plumbing roughed in on the plans. A separate structure indicated on the survey land, small, set into the northern tree line. Notes in the margins. Retreat. Residency. Seasonal use. And lower on the page, in smaller writing as if added later or more tentatively. If she wants to build something. She stands at the workbench for a long time. Olsen waits near the door. Outside, the November light is thin, the clearing pale under a sky the color of unfinished work. She looks at the drawings. She looks at the survey. She looks at the financial records. She looks at the architectural notes in the margin and the 6 pages she has not yet read and the hydrological assessment whose significance she does not yet fully understand. She thinks about the 11 acres along the northern boundary. About the word retreat. About the word residency. About the phrase if she wants to build something, which is grammatically incomplete in a way that feels deliberate, not a plan, not an instruction, but the outline of a permission. She does not know what she wants to build. She is 66 years old, and she does not know the specific shape of what comes next, and she is standing in a hidden room inside a barn on a property she did not know existed 4 months ago, holding drawings made by a man who is dead, beside a man who has been maintaining this place for 12 years out of an unexplained loyalty to an old debt, and the title is clear and the challenge is withdrawn and the lamp she carried through 4 residences is on in the front room of the house across. The clearing. This is what is true. All of it at the same time. He talked about it, Olsen says. Toward the end. She looks at him. The northern acreage. What did he say? Olsen is quiet for a moment. He said he didn't know what it should be. He said that wasn't his decision to make. A pause. He said the land would wait. She looks at the drawings again. The second handwriting in the margins. Who drew these with him, she says. Olsen looks at the bench. My daughter, he says. She's an architect. He asked her to sit with him a few times last year. Said he wanted to think on paper. She looks at the margin note again. If she wants to build something. Does she still have her notes? Eleanor says. Olsen looks at her. Something in his expression shifts in the same way it shifted on the porch the first morning, that settling, that confirmation of something expected and waited for. I'll ask her, he says. She reads Daniel's letter that evening. In the front room. Her mother's lamp on. The fire going in the small iron stove Olsen had demonstrated 2 weeks prior, which she has been using tentatively and is now using with something closer to confidence. The letter covers the northern acreage, the bank account, the architectural conversations with Olsen's daughter. It covers the hydrological assessment, which indicates a spring-fed water source on the 11 acres, reliable and clean, which changes the land's development potential in ways the letter describes with a precision that suggests he consulted someone who understood land. It covers, again, the silence. The years of it. Not apologizing further. He had done that in the previous letter, but acknowledging the specific cost of it, the way it had required her to build her life inside conditions she did not fully understand, trusting the broad shape of an arrangement whose precise dimensions she had never been shown. That was not fair. I knew it at the time and I know it now. The house and the land don't correct it. They are what I was able to do. Near the end he writes about the reading group at the library. She stops. Reads the sentence again. He writes that Cecile Marsh had been a friend of his for many years, a correspondence that began through a historical society exchange and continued without Eleanor's knowledge, and that he had written to Cecile 18 months before his death to tell her that his wife would eventually come to Greenridge and that she would benefit from knowing someone who had also arrived there by decision rather than circumstance. Eleanor sits with this for a moment. The fire makes its small sounds. Outside, the wind has come up, moving through the upper branches of the tree line with the low, continuous sound she has come to associate with this particular hour. She thinks about Cecile's corner table, the tea rather than coffee, the book placed face down. She thinks about the way Cecile had said sit down, if you like, as if it were a small offer and not a prepared one. She does not know how she feels about this. She does not try to resolve it tonight. She puts the letter in the metal case with the rest of the documents. Closes the lid. She will read it again. More than once. There are sections she has moved through too quickly, sentences she has understood individually without yet understanding in sequence. And the 6 pages will require the kind of attention that comes from stillness rather than from sitting with a fire burning and the wind in the trees and the accumulated weight of an evening that has handed her more than she was prepared for. But not tonight. Tonight she sits in the front room with her mother's lamp and the fire and the survey spread on the low table, the 11 acres marked at the northern boundary. She traces the boundary line with one finger. 11 acres. A spring-fed water source. If she wants to build something, she does not know yet what she wants to build. She knows she will need to walk the 11 acres. She knows she wants to meet Olson's daughter. She knows the reading group meets again on Wednesday, and that she will go, and that she will sit in the folding chair and listen more than she speaks, and that eventually the balance of that will shift. She knows Vera is coming for a week in December, and that she will put her mother's lamp in the guest room and bring the other lamp back to the front, and that Vera will stand in the clearing on the first morning and look at the tree line and say something that is not quite the right thing but close enough. She knows Garrett has withdrawn the challenge, and that this is not the same as finished, but is what today is and what tomorrow will also probably be. She knows the light will be different again in the morning. She puts the survey back on the table. Leans back. The lamp throws its amber warmth across the floor, and the fire settles into its lower register, and the wind continues in the trees outside the window. She does not know what she is building. She does not know what it will be called when it exists. But the land is hers. The title is clear. The key is on the hook by the door. And the morning is coming whether she is ready for it or not. End.